Welcome to Don't Take This Personally,
a podcast about the business of creativity.
We are your hosts, Cami Oliveria
and Gabe Conover.
Welcome back to another episode. The day we're recording this, it's kind of stormy. Apologies in advance if some thunder gets picked up.
And some maniacal laughter follows.
Spooky! Really quick before we get started on today's topic, we just wanted to remind you that every Tuesday we will be hopping in a clubhouse room to talk about the previous week's episode, and this has been really fun. So
oh my gosh, it's been so fun. It's
been so fun. It's likely every week been like 10:30 or 11, depending on our lives, because things come up. But if you follow us on Instagram at don'ttakethispersonally.podcast, right? Or .pod? Podcast. Yep. At Don't Take This Personally podcast. You'll be able to see, we'll be announcing every single week the exact time we'll be going on. So, okay, that's
Cam
that.
and I are dressed very differently today.
I know. So I was noticing in our previous weeks that we were unintentionally aligned with our outfits, that we were like really coordinated, and today we're very said different. Nope. Today we were on very different wavelengths with the outfits. Like every other week, it looked like we planned like our color scheme or something. Yeah,
well, like maybe we're fighting. Is that what it is?
We're fighting today.
Anyway,
today we are answering a listener question.
Yeah, first time.
I'm really excited. So the listener question is how to stand out in a saturated market.
Yes.
We are both freaking jazzed and pumped to talk about this because this comes up all the time.
Yes, ridiculous. It's
this
it's
comes
a
up
question,
a lot.
That I feel, again, we'll have something very probably different to say.
Yeah.
I mean, we personally don't necessarily think it is a saturated market completely, and a lot of it is a mindset thing.
Spoiler alert. No surprises there.
Yeah,
That's where
surprises.
This is going. But okay.
Just to prepare you.
So standing out in a saturated market, I understand why this is difficult. It's a feeling. It's basically the idea of a saturated market. Whatever you do, you feel like there's a lot of it. When I was starting photography, I used to complain to my husband about this all the time. Like, it's such a saturated market. How am I ever going to make it? And I'm going to be honest, that was a mindset I had when I was just starting out. And I don't feel this way anymore. And,
totally.
When I would complain about this to Victor, he would be like, Cami, like whatever you do is going to feel saturated because whatever you do, you're naturally surrounding yourself. Like when I started, like at the very, very beginnings, 8 years ago or whenever it was when I started, I didn't feel like it was saturated at all because I didn't know any photographers.
That is a great point.
Instagram was in its baby days back then, so I wasn't following hundreds, if not thousands, of photographers like I do now. I was just following like my 50 college friends, and that was kind of it. And I felt like I was the only one out there putting pictures. And so I think the concept of a saturated market really is perception and kind of your own making.
Totally.
Whatever you're into is
Totally.
going to feel saturated because that's what you're surrounding yourself by. My husband said the same thing when I would complain about this, about his work. Like, he'd be like, I feel like the drum industry is saturated because all I surround myself is with drummers. So,
Yeah, no, totally. Every industry is saturated if you are living in that industry. So
correct.
And like we were thinking about earlier, this little car analogy is once you buy a new car
you want a car,
that is the only car that you see when you're driving around, and you're like, oh, so many people have this car. Why did I think it was so unique?
I know. Like the sunshine orange Subaru Crosstrek. That's the car I want really bad, and I've wanted for years. And that's like the only car I see. Like I drive everywhere I drive. I'm like, all I see is sunshine orange Subarus. I want it so bad. Whereas, when you're not looking for that, you don't see it. So
right. Well, another interesting perspective too is whenever my brothers, for example, introduce me to someone, they're like, oh yeah, Gabe's like famous. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like I have a big following in the photography world. And then I always tell people too, like, I have friends all over the world because our industry is huge, but it's also extremely small.
Yeah.
It's extremely small. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I know people all over the world, but I don't know thousands of people all over the world.
Right.
I know one person that lives in Paris.
I was gonna say, like, you know, like 50 people all over
Exactly.
the world.
But it feels like so many because
Yeah.
before I had no friends all over the world. They were all here.
Before I had no friends
Okay.
around the world. That's so funny. So this is something we wanted to just start off this episode right away, that we personally believe the concept of a saturated market, you are creating that reality for yourself. I have a fun little statistic.
Ooh. Science. I'm just kidding.
Not science. Every year in the US alone, our one country alone, there are 2.5 million weddings that happen.
Amazing.
2.5 million just here alone every year. So to be a full-time photographer, you really only have to attract like 40 or like 20 to 40 of those, depending on your goals. Sometimes less, sometimes more, whatever. You only have to be the right fit for 20 to 40 out of the 2.5 million. You guys, that's not so hard.
No. I wish we had a statistic about how many photographers there were too, but we do have a statistic about the rate of growth, right?
So yeah, it feels like there are so many photographers and new photographers starting all the time because the barrier to entry for photography has never been lower, something we're going to talk about in a future conversation. So yes, I did find a statistic that the rate of professional wedding photographers is going up by 5% a year.
Okay.
But so is the rate of weddings, the amount of weddings. So like,
perfect.
wow,
It just balances itself out.
Balances itself out. And so, if anything, I feel like that's just a reflection of, like, you know, population growth and like more creative things happening and social media. And like, yes, there are so many photographers that are kind of joining the game every single year. But, like, there's so many fucking weddings, you guys.
Right.
Like, there's so many weddings. And these new photographers who are jumping in, saturating the market, I really want to drive this home that they are not your competition.
Yeah, we were kind of calling, like, the noob photographers are not your competition in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, they're not. We're going to refer to them as the noobs.
The noobs.
The noobs. We're showing our age right here.
Exactly.
The noobs. They're not your competition. And like, yes, it feels saturated because whatever you're consumed in, it's all you're going to see. I get so salty sometimes because I'm like, well, now just everyone thinks they're a photographer. Like, I sound like an old woman when I talk like this, or a grumpy old man. But I only think that because it's all I'm surrounding myself with. And so that's the first point we wanted to make. Shut that down.
Yeah, totally. And then, when it comes to the reality is, that made no sense. That sentence. Ignore it. Redo.
Reverse.
So going back to the noobs, just remember that this is one of those industries too that is a little bit of a fad. So people will kind of enter into this with expectations that it's just going to be fun 24/7, and then they're going to realize it's not fun 24/7. It's
Correct.
a real job. It's a real business, and they're not going to continue with wanting to make it work because it's not what they assumed it would be. So if this is something that you want to make a reality for yourself, it takes you being persistent and not being that type of person that just, you know, decides it's not working for them once they're not passionate about it anymore.
Correct.
Or whatever.
Super important. Like, yes, so many are going to be starting. Everyone's got a friend who will offer to shoot their wedding for them, or everyone. You know, yes, there are so many photographers and photographers just starting out, but really important to remember that like, most of them aren't going to make it.
Most of them aren't going to sustain.
Not to be mean. That's just to say people start things and don't finish them all the time.
Totally.
And those people, if you are already in the phase of business where you're thriving, they're literally not your competition. And this is kind of what we were getting at in our pricing episode, talking about undercutting. That, yes, it fucking sucks when people undercut and like charge less than you, but like, if they're just starting out, if you know what you're doing, they're not your competition.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, straight up. It's not that saturated. Like, it is. Yes, there's so many photographers. But I want to encourage you, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the saturatedness, you need to mute some photographers on Instagram or start following some other kind of artists. I'll be straight up. I've had to mute Gabe before because I was so jealous of how quickly he was getting better and I didn't feel like I was. That was more about me than it was about him.
When did you do this?
I know I've never told him
You
this.
actually haven't.
Have I not?
No, you haven't.
I don't think I have. There are people in my life I have had to mute because they make me feel worse about myself.
I've done the same thing to people that I love.
To people that you love.
My mom. No, I'm just kidding.
You know what I mean? Like, there are photographers who I have found if I am scrolling past and my first reaction is like, what's wrong with me? I just need some time to away. And yes, that was Gabe for a time, in a few different seasons, but that's not a problem with him. That's a problem with me and like me feeling stuck and wondering like, well, why aren't I improving like that? And I actually heard something on another podcast that was really helpful that jealousy or envy or whatever it is, use that as fuel, as like, I could be doing more and I'm not, so that's a me problem. So this got on a little bit of a tangent, but it's just to say, if you're feeling like it's overly saturated, you need to unfollow photographers, or just, honestly, the Instagram mute feature is really amazing because it allows me to just kind of like quiet people that are creating some sort of reaction in me I don't like, and then I can just unmute them when I'm not feeling that way anymore.
Totally. Yeah, I do this all the time. It's a very healthy practice. I mean, unfortunately, before it had to be like literally unfollowing people,
and that's
but awkward. The mute option is way better.
The mute option is way better because you're not like, making a scene about like refollowing someone, because that can be weird. That can always be awkward. Yep. So yeah, it's never personal, but it's just, honestly, it's like a compliment. Like, Gabe was making me so jealous for a season. I had to be like, it's not helpful for right now because I'm not feeling good about myself. And then it lasts a few weeks, and then I'm like, actually, that's great. I'm feeling back in my own creative groove. I want to support, and then he's like one of my best friends, so it's like I want to see what he's up to. So it's like, it's really interesting, and so that is what I'm talking about when I'm saying we're creating our own mindset of being in a saturated situation. And please follow some other kinds of accounts.
Yeah, totally.
To like see there's other things out there and other kinds of photography and things like that.
Right. Yeah. The perception. It's a perception thing. Like, yeah. I think that's great. Honestly, I need to silence that.
You need to silence that. Yeah, silence your computer. One or two times I thought we could get away with. Okay.
A little ding.
Resume.
Yep.
No biggie. This is just real life. So yeah, please follow some other people. I've been trying to follow other kinds of photography accounts or other kinds of inspo accounts. I did learn this in a posing theory class I just took last week, about some other kinds of accounts to follow that aren't just wedding photography, that's still creative and inspiring. Following friends. I went through this horrible season where I would unfollow my friends that like weren't photographers just because I was like, I want a really curated feed of just wedding inspo. And then so now I really awkwardly went back and like had to refollow all these friends I love, and it was weird. I was like, I'm so sorry. That was so weird. And I got really obsessed with like the amount of people I was following. So I was like, I got to get that number under this. So I'm just going to follow all these accounts that don't feel relevant to my business. And now I'm like, that was so weird. So I've tried to go and undo all that, basically. Like, if I actually have a thing where I try not to follow photographers I don't know personally.
Yeah.
So then it's more of like me wanting to cheer on my friends more so than just like all this constant quote unquote inspiration, but it never ends up working like that.
Right. Totally. Kind of going back to the standing out portion.
Yeah, how do we stand out?
Right. Because I feel like we've tackled our perception of what a saturated market really is and what it is not, in our opinion.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, like, regardless of whether it is a perception or a mental state or anything like that, it's still important to stand out no matter how many people are doing the same exact thing as you. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, you want to stand out, right? So what are the key things we can do to really stand out from these other people who, some of them are very similar to us, some of them are not. We want to deliver a certain type of experience. What are your first thoughts, Kenny?
Well, yeah, so this is a way better question to be asking. How do we stand out? The market really is not saturated because nobody is you. And like I said before, there are 2.5 million weddings happening in our country alone, and you only have to be the right person to 20 to 40, give or take, depending on your own goals. Mm-hmm. So I just feel like there's so much room to stand out just by being yourself. And of course, branding and social media and all these things. But we actually had a really funny example, even just between Gabe and I.
Yes. The being yourself thing always makes me cringe a little bit. Every time I hear someone say, "Oh, be yourself," I'm just like, I know. Stop.
I know.
Shut up. But I mean, again, as much as I hate the phrase, the reality of it is that it is true, and that there is a certain type of client for every different type of person.
Yeah.
And before we get into like the analogy of Cammie and I, there was my friend Michelle Lillywhite.
I thought you were gonna say Michelle, your wife.
No, I mean,
like,
she's
friend,
also my friend, but my wife too. No, my friend Michelle Lillywhite. When I was first starting out, I was second shooting for her a lot, and she is very different from me. She's very introverted and kind of soft-spoken, more of a fly-on-the-wall type photographer. And she was telling me that she used to think that she had to be a certain way in order, like she had to be this extroverted, extremely outgoing person in order for people to actually like working with her. And it was so interesting to me because at the time I was doing the opposite, where I was like, oh, I feel like as an extroverted person, I need to tone that down a little bit, be more of a fly on the wall, because the reality is I'm just here to do my job and be in the background. That's what my job is as a photographer, which is so not the case. And then once Michelle realized, she was like, oh, I there's literally people that would rather have someone like me. Tons of people who would rather have someone like Michelle than me, because I'm a little too obnoxious for them. And then there are people that think that they want someone that is a little bit more involved and a partier like I am. Yeah. And that's the reality. And so that's what I try to really capitalize on is like my personality, me being myself, is what sells myself to people. Yeah. So straight up. And this is something that over the years I try to harness more and more. I do get like the anxiety gets the best of me, and sometimes I feel like publicly I may be like a 60 to 70% version of like the true Cammie, because I'm like so scared of, I always want to I've always tried to be like the photographer for everyone. So I feel like I've always tried to meet in the middle a little bit on my energy and outspokenness and F-bombs and whatever it is. But I've really been putting a lot of work lately into just like not thinking so hard about how I'm presenting myself and just trusting that the right people will connect with it. Because Gabe and I are a fascinating little case study of this. Yes, we did this morning. Because I was saying that the reality too is that you also want to stand out from people that are similar to you. And the point is, like, Cammie and I are very similar. We get a lot of the same inquiries. People compare us to each other all the time, and it's all very relevant and true. We're a similar presence. Right. We have a similar presence. We're both big personalities, both extremely involved in our clients' lives and in the wedding day. But there are so many key things that also make us different, from our aesthetic style, from like our editing style, to our personal life choices. A big example is I have kids and I have this big family. Cammie doesn't necessarily want that. So no, I'm just like the queen of the dogs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm not. I don't know if I'll ever have a pet. Aww. I know. I'm sorry. Aww. I know. Belly loves you. I do. I love Bella. Yeah. You better. Nothing against pets. You better. But the reality of this is that people who have similar goals in life or similar choices that they want to make to me are going to be more attracted to me because it's something that we can relate on. Yeah. Like, I get so many inquiries and clients that have kids already before they get married, because they talk to me on the phone and they're like, oh, Gabe has kids. Like, he's probably great around kids. Right, it's just a point of connection. Exactly. Yeah. It's another point of connection. And then you relate so much to these people who just absolutely love their pets. Yeah. I get a lot of dog people. Yeah. People who treat their dog like it's a human child. Yes. And so much so that it comes up in almost every inquiry I get. See? That people are like, oh my gosh, and we have this dog, and your dog is so cute. And, I try to be out there about, like, this dog is my life. Her name is Bellatrix. I'm obsessed with Harry Potter. I'm a Slytherin. In almost all of my inquiries, these things are brought up. And they're random, weird things that I never thought people would care about, but it's, like, a point of connection. Like, I literally had someone book me because they were like, oh, I knew I needed to find a Slytherin to shoot my wedding. Oh my God. Yeah,
like my fellow Slytherins. Yes, I'm shooting their
hilarious.
wedding in September.
See,
I
it's
love
true.
them.
It's
And
so true.
these random things that make us our own. So even though Gabe and I do have a lot of overlapping personalities, that doesn't mean every single couple who wants a big personality will want all the other parts of me. And
Yes.
not even personality wise, but also aesthetically. Like my photography style is going to be a lot more vibrant and colorful, and Gabe's is a lot more editorial and a little bit more muted. And that's not to say one is better than the other. I
Right.
hired him for my own photos, even though my editing is different, you know?
Right.
But so if someone's looking for a big personality, but who will also deliver those like high-end editorial looking images, like I would send them to Gabe.
Right.
If someone inquired with him and was like, oh, I want more color to my images, he would probably send them to me.
I'd be like, not me,
he'd
but
be
I've
like-
got the perfect person.
yeah, he's like, Cami is like the same person as me
Yes.
if you like my energy, but has more color to her
Yes.
work or something. So there are things that, you know, at first would make me feel threatened about Gabe, about like, oh man, he's taking what my thing is. Like, he's the big personality who loves to boogie and party with a beer in one hand and a camera in the other in the
Boogie.
middle of the dance floor, you know, and just like be crazy and
Yeah.
have fun and be the loudest laugh in the room. You know, I
Yeah.
thought that was my thing. And then when I met him, I was like, no, you're taking my thing. But then
And then she muted me.
and then I muted him. No, this was far more recently than that. I love you so much.
I love that.
But, you know, it's like those things that make us different make us the perfect fit for the people who need to find us. Because
Yes.
if we were the same in all ways, I couldn't begin to serve all the couples that both of us get. That's crazy.
Right.
Like, so, you know, if there's a pool of like 100 couples that love me and Gabe, if we
Right.
didn't have our differences, I couldn't take them all.
No, totally.
So, I don't know, like, you stand out just by, like, being yourself,
Be yourself.
which is such an annoying phrase, and I get that it's cheesy, but that's, like, pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is the biggest thing, is that
Yeah.
you know, there's a reason that you have the friends that you have. There's
Yeah.
a reason that people are attracted to you as a person.
Yes.
So how come it's different in the workplace? It's not.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yes. What is that sound?
Dead silence. It's your pipes.
Are those my
I
pipes?
think so.
Oh my gosh, you guys, spooky stuff is happening
There's
in here.
thunder. The pipes are shaking.
Oh my gosh.
The house is collapsing.
Oh my gosh, I wonder if people are gonna think we cut out or something and stop
know.
listening. If you're still listening, so
Yeah.
we'll kind of wrap up our last few points. So what sets you apart? Literally yourself. Just being your weird self, sharing the weird random stuff you're into. Like, I was bonding with one of my couples last week at an engagement shoot over the fact that I've been playing a lot of pickleball lately, and I love it. So random. Or I can't tell you
so funny.
I can't tell you how many of my couples will like tag me in their games of Settlers of Catan. Being
Oh my
like,
God.
game night, thinking of you, Cami Oliveria. And I'm like, wow, all these little random things about me that I thought were embarrassing to share that makes people feel connected to me. And so, I don't know, you just have to share the weird shit you're into and not be afraid to do it. Try to be your full personality, whatever that is. Don't try to be something you're not,
I
because
love
it
that.
won't work. And
Oh my
so,
gosh,
yeah,
that's awesome.
that's a big one. And so for me, it's just like removing the anxiety and not overthinking things. So that's just be yourself. Gabe, what about experience?
Yes, I mean, obviously we've talked about this before, and I feel like in one of our first episodes we talked about how important client experience is and how it definitely sets everything apart. And we have a whole episode that's going to be dedicated to this whole topic. But the reality is that having an incredible, simplistic, easy client experience that everyone can jive with is so important.
Yeah.
And makes people just so much more excited to sing your praises, to tell their friends about you, to talk about how incredible their experience was.
Yep.
I get 95% of my bookings from referrals of past clients at this point.
Amazing.
Which I would never want it any other way, because
Yeah.
it's like we've both vetted each other
It's
already.
a great sign.
Oh, it's amazing.
They're
And
my easiest client
by
partnerships.
far
the
the easiest clients.
Yeah.
Because they already know you and
Yeah.
you already know them.
And like, if I got along with their friends, like, I'm probably going to get along with them.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Exactly.
So the experience, who you are, all of that. And even simple stuff like what you put on your website. I mean, just be yourself and don't overthink it. I can't tell you, want to talk about trying to stand out in a saturated industry. Avoid all the bullshit phrases everyone puts on their websites. Like, oh my God, I'm blanking now. I used to have such a fun little list of them. But like, if you see like a phrase on your website, don't like put it on yours. Like, what's an example of like a fluffy photography phrase?
Lover of the little
Lover of
things.
light.
Oh, lover of light.
Shut the fuck up. Of course you love light. You're a photographer. Oh my God. Like lover of light, or,
Inspired by the little things.
just like, so you see what I'm saying? Just like kind of fluffy bullshit.
Cliche.
That doesn't mean anything.
I love being myself. No, I'm just kidding.
Even like natural light photographers sometimes rubs me the wrong way. I'm like, of course we all prefer natural light. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
That when I see that, I'm just like, oh, so you're not comfortable if you don't have natural light? That's a red flag for wedding photographers.
Yeah.
So just like avoiding these kind of fluffy phrases that don't actually mean anything to you. I try to write all the words on my website in a few minutes. I try to not overthink it. I just write how I would talk. Don't overly be concerned with punctuation and perfection, something that I think drives my husband crazy.
Oh my gosh, drives my wife crazy too.
It does?
Yes.
She's a grammar snob? Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yeah, crazy.
But I think coming across as, writing how you talk is more important.
Yes, agreed.
Than perfection, and it makes you relatable, So, anyways, all of that will help you stand out.
Go along with what Cammie is saying is it's more of like this literal word vomit thing where you're just like, this is literally how I would introduce myself to a new person in real life.
Yeah.
These are the things that I would talk about. These are the ways that I would say it, and it sounds like a jumbled up mess, but that's who I am.
Yeah, literally.
I don't remember the things that I wrote down on my About Me page on my website. I don't think I've ever said exactly that again in my entire life, but they're all things I would say.
Yeah.
But I talked about like the nicknames my son has for all of us, which are all very obscure and strange, and he hasn't said them in a little bit.
Someone who has a family will relate to that so hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that will mean so much to them.
I made up a few words, I'm pretty sure.
I think you did. I've looked at your site and been like, what's that? That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, just not overthinking it and just writing like you would talk. And, again, this is going back to like the concept of trying to attract the ideal, quote unquote, ideal client, which in our clubhouse, a lovely person who joined us, her name is Amy. She's a florist. She calls it an aligned client, which I love so much more.
Yes.
And we'll touch base more on this later. But like, rather than being so obsessed with finding the right clients, focus on being the ideal photographer. Like who is your ideal photographer? Who is the best ideal version of yourself? And the right person will be the right people will be attracted to that. And let me tell you, you don't need that many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it all just comes back to being relatable, and being relatable doesn't mean everyone needs to be able to relate to you, but if you are able to just portray a real life person, then people are going to be able to understand you and feel like you're a real life person. Because every time I go to a website and I read all of these really intense, poetic things that don't, I mean, I'm sure maybe that relates. Some people relate to that.
There are people that feel connected to that.
Yeah, there are people that feel connected to that, but I personally do not.
Yeah.
So I guess, I don't know. Maybe that's not a great point, because you're right. People do feel connected to those
Some
things.
people would be connected to that.
But people can smell fakeness a mile away. You can. It's easy to find when someone's being fake. That's what I should be saying.
People's bullshit meters go off.
Yeah, it's easy. And people, that's not what people are looking for. People want a real life person. So are you being a real life person when you communicate about yourself online, or are you not?
Something I've had to do a lot of work on. Oh my gosh, the timer's about to go off in 5 minutes, and then I'll finish my sentence, and then 5 minutes. I meant 5 seconds, and then we'll be done. Beep, beep, beep. Oh, I said it back to Harry Potter.
Oh my god. I was like, wow.
And with that, I don't remember. Oh, yeah. Okay, so if you're unapologetically yourself, having like a small group of dedicated people is so much more important than like a large group of like 50-50 people.
Yeah.
So when I stopped trying to be for everyone and be kind of like a lukewarm version of myself to appeal to everyone, actually a lot of this came from like my toes being dipped in like old church circles and not wanting to offend them, but also like kind of coming into myself in a different way and like not knowing how to please everyone. I was like not really ideal for anyone.
Interesting.
Because I was just like kind of lukewarm for everyone.
Such a trigger Christian word.
Lukewarm.
Lukewarm.
Oh. See, it's still there.
It
I've
is,
still got some
apparently.
things back
Apparently.
there. But anyways, any last thoughts before we
No,
wrap up?
I think that was perfect.
Okay, I hope this was helpful. We basically just said we don't think it's a saturated market.
Yeah.
There's,
I think this was our most chaotic episode yet.
I think so.
But it was good.
I'm sorry, guys. Us Californians don't know how to deal with the rain and the
That's it.
storms, and we're all out of sorts. But we hope that was helpful. There's enough
Yes.
work for everyone. Photographers aren't your competition, and newbies are certainly not your competition. So
Yes. No. Yeah. The newbies, they won't last.
okay, hope that was helpful. Bye. See you on Clubhouse Tuesdays.